The following program is produced by Londonderry residents. The views and opinions expressed are not necessarily the views and opinions of the LACTV staff or its volunteers, and should not be considered an endorsement by CTV20 or its staff and volunteers.
Well, welcome to another edition of Concord Conversations, where we talk about the issues involving town, county, and state government. Today, we are honored to have here Kelly Ayotte, who is running for governor of New Hampshire. Kelly is a prior prosecutor, Attorney General of New Hampshire, and former U.S. State Senator. Before we get to that, I'd like to show a little button here, and then we'll turn it over to Kelly. We have a button that says, "Don't Mass Up New Hampshire," and I think that goes to how we feel about this upcoming campaign. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kelly and ask her to explain what this button is about.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Doug. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, Sherm. I might call you during this, but
Absolutely.
I am really glad to be here. That button is about a lot of New Hampshire pride. First of all, we're very different than our neighbors. We have no income tax, no sales tax. We're not a sanctuary state, which I hope we never become. But I've come into this campaign as a lifelong New Hampshire person. And the reason I've been saying, you know, we're one election away from becoming Massachusetts, or don't mass it up, is that the Democrats that are running for governor, you know, one of them was endorsed by the governor of Massachusetts. And what's happening in Massachusetts is, of course, more taxes. They're a sanctuary state. In fact, the governor of Massachusetts has had to declare a state of emergency because they've been overrun by illegal immigrants. In fact, they're housing them now at Logan at night, which is crazy. And so we can't have that here in New Hampshire. We're a great state. I know both of you have fought hard to preserve the New Hampshire advantage on low taxes and making sure no income or sales tax, no death taxes, making sure we're a friendly state to do business, and then protecting individual freedom. So that's what's at stake in this election, and that's why I don't want us to become like our neighbors, especially Massachusetts.
Mr. Speaker, well, how do you view this upcoming election for governor as important to New Hampshire?
Well, I think, you know, I mean, not only is the state election important, as the federal election is important, but the state election is extremely important because if you look at the map, we're the only state north of, I think, Virginia that is still red. And if we're going to keep it red, we need a governor that's going to make sure that they continue to work for the New Hampshire advantage. And I mean, Kelly and I have known each other since she was in the AG's office, and I know she'll do a great job as governor, and I think that with her as governor, with you know, the House remaining Republican and the Senate remaining Republican, we can really get some good stuff done.
That's
I mean,
right.
let's face it, we came through 2 years of COVID, and we just are coming through now with the tightest majority we've had in, I think, 150 years or something of that nature. So yeah, we need to make sure that New Hampshire stays, because the Democrat Party of New Hampshire and the Democrats in the New Hampshire House and the Senate are so far to the left that this state will be California or Illinois or, you know, New York or something like that in a heartbeat if they were to take over. And I hope the citizens of this state realize that.
I'm sure. I wish they knew exactly what we saw every time we have session, the bills that are coming through that are barely being defeated that would have put us in the Massachusetts category as well. But people are also interested in a lot of issues in the state. I know here locally there's issue of water and water purity. Could you talk about some of the other issues that you see in New Hampshire as being important besides the water issue as well?
Yeah, Doug, obviously the water issue is really important to this area. But to our state as a whole, the PFAS issue, the contamination, many citizens are experiencing that in their wells. And I know that's impacted Londonderry and of course Merrimack with St. Gobain. So this is an issue we need to work on to make sure that we have good water systems and clean water for people. And I know the Department of Environmental Services has focused on this. So I look forward to working with the communities and owners on this issue, because that's a basic function of government, making sure that we have clean water. And I know you've worked very hard on that issue, so I appreciate the work that you're doing for your constituents on it. You know, the other issues that I think are important, thank you to both of you in the legislature for leading on education freedom. We saw during COVID, you know, under a Republican leadership, we've passed education freedom accounts, and that means really putting parents in the driver's seat of where is the best place to have my child educated. And I've seen it with my 2 children. Each child learns differently, and allowing parents to have the freedom to take the state portion of education funding and say, a charter school is better for my child. Public schools are great. I'm a product of public schools, so that's a great option too, but also giving parents other options, whether it's homeschooling, all the things of making sure that really our kids are educated in the best way for them to learn. So I think that's an important issue you've worked on. I am for education freedom. I think it's so important that we have the best education system in the country, and that's really putting parents in the driver's seat, as well as parents' rights. To me, that's another very important issue that I know if we had a bigger majority in the House, we could get a Parents' Bill of Rights passed. And I would be honored to sign that as governor, because you know, parents need to know what's happening with their kids. As a mother, to me, wanting to know what's happening with my children, what's the curriculum in our schools, of course we want our parents to know that. And so I really appreciate the work the House has done on that, but we hope we can get a bigger majority to make sure we get that done too.
Yeah, another 5 or 6 people, and we could have passed the Parental Bill of Rights. And, you know, I think of the 3 years that I've been speaker so far, that was probably one of my biggest disappointments, that we lost that by, what is it, 4 votes, I think it was something.
Pretty much, yeah.
So, I mean, that was disappointing, but we still got time. We can get that done.
We do, and you know, parents are so important, as you know, and standing up for parents. So I'm glad that you've both done that, and I certainly look forward to doing that as governor.
I know that one of the issues that came out of the recent New Hampshire primary for the state, which surprised a few political pundits, was the immigration issue. Now, New Hampshire, of course, is a border state on the north, but we are concerned about the country as a whole. How do you view the immigration issue as it affects New Hampshire?
Well, this issue very much impacts New Hampshire. You know, right now with the Biden open borders, more and more fentanyl is being trafficked over our southern border to places like Lowell and Lawrence. It comes into our state and it poisons our people. So I would like a Republican president in office and enforcing our laws and securing our borders. I mean, it's not good for New Hampshire. And then we've had issues on the northern border as well. In fact, I had the chance to go up to Pittsburgh and meet with law enforcement in that area. Also went up and to see a farm right on the border with Canada. And that sector of the border on our state has, over the last 11 months, has seen more illegal immigrants coming over than in the last 10 years combined in terms of interdictions and arrests and things. And, you know, 76 different countries, so it's not the Canadians invading us here. So this is a real safety issue. And I know the legislature has designated in the last budget more resources toward law enforcement up there, but certainly as governor, I will be focusing on that. We can also never become a sanctuary state. These states that are sanctuaries, like Massachusetts, they're being overrun. And it's also a situation where they are facing, you know, their residents getting, you know, look what happened in New York City. They literally had to, the mayor there has a school going remote so they can house illegal immigrants, and kids have to stay home remote. I mean, New Hampshire, using our common sense, we won't have sanctuary policies, no driver's licenses for illegal immigrants, because that to me makes no sense. So these are the policies that I think are at stake that you as legislators at the state level have been working on. But as governor, I will be focusing on this as well and making sure that we're never a sanctuary state, that we're in a situation where we're enforcing our laws, and that we allow our law enforcement to work on these issues and cooperate with federal authorities.
That's right. I think one thing is, a lot of times the news media does not use this word, but I think the issue is illegal immigration. We are all for legal immigration.
That's
The
right.
country built on that.
We are.
It's
I
the
bet you we
illegal
can all
part of it.
trace our roots somewhere else, and we are a country where legal immigration is who we are. We're the melting pot. But our family and people that came here, they did it the right way. They waited in line. They did what they worked. They learned English. They became part of our country. And just all we're asking is for people to follow our laws and to do things the right way.
Two of the issues, Kelly, that the businesses are talking to us about and have talked to us about is the lack of affordable housing
Yes.
and the lack of childcare. Now, I set up those two committees, one to deal with housing and one to deal with childcare, and they have come up with a few solutions to try and fix it. Have you got any thoughts on any ideas that you might have?
Yeah, I think this is a really important economic issue. The housing issue is one that I've heard so much from out on the campaign trail. And, selfishly, as the mother of two kids that I'd like to stay in New Hampshire and live here, I mean, at some point, when I've got one who's a freshman at the Air Force Academy, and I've got one in high school, but if we want to keep our young people here, we have to obviously have affordable housing and retired folks too. And this to me is critical. So some ideas that I've had and heard out there, I know the governor's established the Invest New Hampshire Fund, working with the legislature and making sure that those partnerships with local municipalities and with obviously developers, that those funds are administered sensibly, and that we're able to use them to help expand affordable housing. In fact, I was just at a ribbon cutting in Salem, where right in the Tuscan Village, where there's 77 new units of affordable housing, and it's beautiful. So there are ways that we can do this, and we can partner to help, but we're not going to subsidize it. We're going to help incentivize the private sector, that can be tax incentives. We also, I think, need to make it easier to build. Like, I've heard a lot of stories about, at the state level, people trying to build things and they don't get answers from the DOT, DES, Fish and Game, making sure our permitting process is efficient, because if the people's approvals languish too long, then they're not going to put the money in to do this. So we could make government more efficient and better on these issues. And then I also think we have opportunities to partner with municipalities and towns on issues like infrastructure. So we're not going to subsidize housing, but there's infrastructure issues we could help if you're going to build affordable housing. And I look forward to doing that. And I look forward to working with your legislative committee on this. And then in terms of childcare, I know that there has been a program in place, I think, to look at that, what was passed in terms of that the governor pushed with employers, private employers, and covering childcare, to look at that and to see how is that program working, and could we make it work more effectively? Because I know there haven't been as many employers who have signed up for it that we would like. So I'd like to look at that and see how could we help make that work more effectively for the people of the state. And then I also think it's about having enough child care providers. So we have had a shortage of child care providers, so we need to make sure that the people who are in child care, of course, are qualified and are going to keep our kids safe. That's number one priority. But also looking at partnering with the private employers to say, how do how do we incentivize more people to actually go into childcare? And I don't think, again, government can't solve all these problems, but what we can do is we can work with the private sector, bring people to the table to help find solutions for New Hampshire.
I know that one of the issues we have with retaining people in the state and businesses and having affordable housing is the cost of energy,
Yes.
fuel and electricity, not to mention inflation, which the state has very little control over. But how do you see us moving forward in terms of dealing with the high cost of
Yeah.
electricity and the fact that we all know that renewables cannot handle everything. We know that we have to have a balance, and we know that storage batteries cannot handle everything, yet we have a lack of natural gas that comes into the state,
Yeah.
which drives the cost of electricity. So what would you look forward to in dealing with our Department of Energy to
Yeah.
attack this?
Doug, it is energy. We have some of the highest energy costs. It impacts everyone in New Hampshire, and especially hits those working families that are trying to, make ends meet. And I think that as governor, really my job will be to make sure, number one, that whatever policies we do, they focus on lowering energy costs. And I believe in an all the above approach. And that means that I'm not going to support any policies that will add costs to energy. We need to be looking to reduce costs. I also think we need to look to some new technologies and make sure New Hampshire's ready for them. For example, as we think about the small nuclear, like those reactors are not in a place where we're immediately able to adopt them in New Hampshire, but I want to make sure that we're in a position that regulatory-wise we can be an early adopter. Because can imagine if we could do the small micro nuclear reactors in places throughout the state, and we could really help our energy profile. The other piece to me is, making sure that we fight to not support in terms of the region, like Reggie and other things, that we're not doing things that add costs on. And I know the governor's office has fought hard on when some of people in our region some other states want to add unnecessary positions or unnecessary regulations that could impact New Hampshire. I think as governor, I really need to fight those.
Yeah, those are, I think, three of the biggest issues that we hear from business. And I know childcare is one that we lost so many during COVID, that never opened back up again.
Yes.
And also, it's the cost from what, some people tell me they have to pay per week, for childcare.
Right.
It almost is at the point where, is it worth it going back to work? And from what we've heard is especially a lot of, mothers or, single family, mothers or
Yeah,
fathers.
it's very difficult.
Just can't afford it. So I think those are some of the main issues.
I-
As you said, we got to work on.
I agree. I think we need to work on it, and I think from the state perspective, providing, whether it's a tax incentive, like lower taxes in ways that employers who are willing to, work on this child care issue, provide child care for their employees, we could make it easier, I think, on the tax burden front. And I think that's something that we should look at as well.
One of the other things that I know that it's becoming more and more of a problem is the infrastructure.
Yes.
And the lack of money that we've had to, I think it was back in Bush's last year in office, we had to start taking money out of the general fund to fund the federal highway, program. So there's been a lot of things thrown around, but nobody seems to have an answer as to how we're going to get back to where we were, we don't want to raise the gas tax, we'd like to get rid of it.
Right.
But somehow we got to come up with some money to fix the roads.
Well, you also are, I know that you've taken a step to address electric vehicles too, because they're heavier and they're going to have an even bigger burden on the roads. And obviously, they're not paying the gas tax, so that's something I know the legislature's taken a step to address, but we do have to look at that as well. And as we think about added electric vehicles coming forward. And then at the federal level, I think, where we get the money from the federal government, I can't pretend to tell you that Washington obviously doesn't have his act together, but let's hope that they get the funding done for that going forward. And one thing that I will do as governor, having served in the Senate, is I think I can very much fight for New Hampshire to make sure that, we're a donor state. Like, we put more money into the federal government than we get back. So I like to keep things locally. And so, but I will not hesitate to fight for New Hampshire for our infrastructure projects with Washington, making sure that we get the money that we've actually given more. We give more than we get back. So to me, I think that's important as well.
So what would an Ayotte governorship look like when you become governor to the state in terms of how the people are going to be looking at you and how you'll be coming around to the state and looking at the individual local issues? What persona are you going to be projecting out there?
Well, I love this state. Obviously just going to be me. And for me, I'm running to keep New Hampshire safe, prosperous, and free. So those will be my 3 things that I'm focusing on every single day. But I think it's really important, you both understand this, government in New Hampshire has to be accessible. So as governor, I will be in touch with the representatives who very much grassroots and out in their communities, and our senators, but average people just out every day trying to listen and hear what is happening and the issues that impact, whether it's water or energy. I'm going to go to the source. I'm going to go there. I'm going to find out what's happening and then make sure that I can do all I can as governor to serve the people of this state. Government is there to serve the people, not the other way around, and I very much view my role that way, and I want to be accessible and accountable. And to me, making sure that our great state preserves our live free or die values that mean something, and then strengthen them, working with the legislature on education, on housing, on childcare, on making sure, though, also we do all these things in a fiscally accountable way that doesn't grow government, but really make sure that the government is one that accounts to the people. To me, that's how I will serve as governor.
I know that you are very much in favor to look after our veterans community in the state. And so do you see a path from the governor's point of view of how we can get a full VA hospital in the state?
Yeah, this issue is one that I fought hard as a U.S. Senator, and actually work with Senator Shaheen in terms of getting at least our veterans access to use care outside the VA, because we didn't have a full service hospital, to use private providers, and to get New Hampshire was one of an early state to say our veterans can use care outside, but there's still too many veterans that are falling through the cracks. And I certainly will continue to advocate that New Hampshire should have a full service hospital. And I know our federal delegation as well. This is a nonpartisan issue, right? That both sides of the aisle agree on, but it hasn't happened. So we have to make sure that our VA is working effectively, that our veterans have access. So I'll fight for the full service, but we can't wait for that either. We got to make sure that we are not leaving our veterans behind. And by the way, I think also our veterans service organizations, that they're coordinating with each other and working together, and I think the governor's office can help with that to make sure that what I worry sometimes is a veteran goes for services here, they don't offer the services, and they don't know that there's maybe another organization over here that can offer the services. So let's make sure we don't leave any veteran behind. And I want New Hampshire to be the most veteran-friendly state in the nation. We have so many people who have served in our state, and of course I come from a military family. I know you served in the Air Force, Doug. My husband served in the Air Force. I have a daughter at the Air Force Academy. This is important to me, and making sure that our state veterans office is really focusing on veterans know what services they can receive because they've earned them, that we help them also, I think, network with the VSOs on things like employment, and that they know, for example, with this new Veterans Campus that's being built in Franklin, that we are going to have a place where veterans feel welcome, where there's housing for veterans too, where there's care. So I can tell you I'll wake up every day on this issue, and my husband Joe as well, as you know. Having served, we're both very passionate about it.
Super. Speaker, we have a few minutes left.
Anything else that you'd like to talk about, Kelly?
Yeah, I think one other thing I appreciate your asking, Mr. Speaker, is our law enforcement community. You know, having served as Attorney General of this state, I've worked very closely with law enforcement, and we have a recruitment and retention problem right now. In fact, we're down 77 troopers. I've met with many of our local police chiefs, police officers, and they're down too. So, and I've also heard that from the firefighters. I just I've met with a lot of firefighters too, and hearing that we need people to come into our public safety professions and we need them to stay. So I think one thing I know the legislature is working on is looking to make sure that our retirement system is one that retains people. So I think that's an important issue. The other issue for me that I also know you're working on, and I hope it gets done, if not, I'm going to be all on it as governor, is bail reform. Because a number of years ago, the legislature passed bail reform, but unfortunately, the reform is not working. What's happening is it's become a revolving door where criminals are getting back out on the streets. And I've heard this. We heard this from our newly elected mayor of Manchester, that this is his top priority. But I've also heard it, the National Police Chief, 2 of his officers were assaulted. They had to go to the hospital, and before they were out of the hospital, the guy who assaulted them was back on the street. We can't have that. The other thing I want to do is make sure we have the toughest penalties against fentanyl dealers, because these drug dealers are smart. They'll figure out, if I traffic this stuff into New Hampshire and we have the toughest penalties, they'll adjust their behavior. So these are some of the public safety issues that I want to work on as governor, and I look forward to working with the legislature on.
Yeah, that's the retirement. We've got a number of pieces of legislation that we're working on the retirement.
Yes.
And I think that, Terry Roy and the Criminal Justice Committee are working hard on the bill reform. I saw, I think it was on the news, where it was down in Massachusetts, somebody assaulted, a handicapped person, and they were out on the street immediately.
Yeah, that's because that was the one where it was a sanctuary issue, because it was an illegal immigrant who was arrested, and then there was sort of their sanctuary, so they didn't cooperate with the federal authorities who had a detainer on him. That's why we can't ever have that here in New Hampshire, because we need all of our law enforcement to be able to work together to keep the public safe.
Well, thank you, Kelly. I see we're running out of time. We surely would like to have you come back at some other time this year, again, to talk more about what's going on, and we'll have others here as well. So for now, this is Doug Thomas and Speaker Sherman Packard signing off from Concord Conversations, and looking forward to our next episode. Thank you for watching.
Thank you for having me.
The preceding program was produced by Londonderry residents. The views and opinions expressed are not necessarily the views and opinions of the LACTV staff or its volunteers, and should not be considered an endorsement by CTV 20 or its staff and volunteers.